Yes, I'm Greg Reicks. I work as a research associate at South Dakota State University. So under Doctors David and Sharon Clay, and Cheryl Reese is a coworker of mine. She was originally going to give this talk, but she had something come up, so here I am. So there we go. So South Dakota On-Farm Soybean Research Program, it's, as we said, funded by the Research and Promotion Council for Soybeans. We've started to include some corn stuff into it this year as well. So farmers, with this program, farmers, like many other on-farm research programs, get to choose what they want to test. It's not us out there telling them what to do. So they get to do this on their own farm and with their own equipment to give a more real-world scenario, real-world results. So what we do is we assist with the experimental design, the data analysis, and we provide reports to the farmers on our website, which anyone can view. So a typical trial, many times when we first start working with people, they want to just do one big block of everything, and that's a trial in a lot of people's viewpoints, but we want people to put some space between the treatment strips, so we kind of get like a sandwich type effect there. So we have in this situation, we'd have a 60-foot wide treatment strip, could be two 30-foot planter passes or a 60-foot wide sprayer pass, whatever it is you're testing. So we typically only look at these green ones are combine passes here. So these are the yield monitor data. We typically only look at the middle combine pass because the outside passes are pretty close to the edge, and the head might be overlapping into land that's not treated. So we typically just look at a middle combine pass for doing that. So one of the hardest sells usually when we first start working with people is replication. People, like I said, they usually just want to do one side-by-side comparison, and that's done a lot out there. So but the problem with doing that is we can't really run a statistical analysis on that. So in this instance here, I have say we have a 4-bushel yield response. You say, wow, great, I got 4 bushels. But you can't do any statistics. So we usually use a 95% confidence interval because we want to say with 95% certainty that what we tested is a real response. Maybe that's not the proper statistical language there, but it's just to help you understand what we're trying to go for. So if we up our replications to 2 reps, do 2 strips here. In this example, I got 66 bushels for my treated, but only 61 for my untreated. You might say, hey, that's great, we got 5-bushel yield response. But when you only have 2 replications, it's hard to get that 95% confidence interval. We would have needed a 21-bushel yield response, which all you know in soybeans that's pretty steep, isn't it? So 2 reps, yeah, it can be done, but a 3rd rep's going to help us out even more. We usually like to see a minimum of 3 from farmers. So in this example here, we got a 6.7 yield bushel kick. You might say, hey, that's awesome, right? But we would have needed 9.2 for that to be significant at a 95% confidence interval. So adding that 4th rep finally got us there in this example. Not to say 3 doesn't work. We see that work plenty of times, but just for getting the maximum kick out of your research, having that 4th one or even 5, 6, 10, whatever. I've seen 12 or 15 sometimes from farmers. We got a 6.5 response here, and we only needed 6.2 for it to be different. So we got there. It took 4 reps, but we got there. So one of the other problems we really have is that most fields aren't uniform. I know here in the Red River Valley, maybe that's not the case, and we got places like that in South Dakota too, but for the most part, most of our fields have quite a bit of slope to them. So for example, if I have a treated strip here and I'm just doing a single side-by-side comparison, which is often done, well, if I would use this one as my check or my comparison, it looks like, hey, great, I got 5 bushels on that strip. But let's say I would have used this one right next to it, and I see this happen all the time. There's that much variability in fields. It makes it look like, oh my gosh, I lost 5 bushel there. with what I did. So how do you address that? So we usually use inverse distance weighting method. If you want to know more about that, I'll email me and I'll help you out. So what we typically do, just kind of ignore this first one for now. It's really not totally necessary. So we'll just kind of focus on this guy right here. So this would be 3 treatment strips right here. So what we do is take those 3 strips, and we got, this code, I guess you could say, it's a computer program that does this, and you can use R for doing this, which is free. So you just got to write the code, which we have. So we estimate what the yield of those strips would have been if I would have never applied the treatment. So that's our control. Instead of doing a side-by-side comparison, we get the estimate of those 3 strips or 4 or 10, whatever it is, without the treatment. So then we take our treated here. This is our yield data. That's the actual yield monitor data from the 3 treatment strips. We overlay that onto our estimated, what it would have been if we would have never done the treatment, and then we have our yield difference map. So anywhere where we got blues and greens, we gained yield. Anywhere we got reds and oranges, we lost yield. So we can really look at not just whether we see a yield response to whatever we're doing, but where in the field we see one, or where in the field we see a yield loss. So here's our website. You can Google it, on-farm research, South Dakota soybean, and just click the view trials button. They'll get you right in there. It's fairly easy to use. There's queries for just like anything else. If you're online shopping, you type in what you want to see and it'll filter it out for you. So there it is. So one of the things we really look at in addition, like I said, where in the field things work, and this is a pretty common site, and I'm sure it is in places around here too. Just going up this slope, if I'm doing a trial and I'm coming down this slope, you can kind of see we have 3 really different zones that all could be managed differently. In this day and age, that is possible. So our summit, you can see we really don't have canopy closure up there. Our back slope, a nice full lush soybean canopy. And our foot slope, it was probably too wet for much of the growing season. So as we go across the field, whether it be spraying something, planting a different rate, whatever it is, do we have potential to change things from here to here to here? So one of the goals of our on-farm program is to help farmers see if that's a possibility in their fields. So to do that, we typically analyze the statistics by yield zone. So we break fields out into these are arbitrary, you can assign whatever you want, but we use 55 bushel plus for our high yield environment in South Dakota. 35 to 55 we classify as medium, and then below 35 is considered low. So that's what we got. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit now, and we're going to talk about our South Dakota, our soybean yield contests. I'm guessing you people might have those in your state as well, where farmers can submit yields. No, this really isn't anything scientific, but it kind of helps us. This is the starting point for a lot of research and on-farm research. What are people seeing out there just in general? So that's a place where you can get ideas. You can go to the coffee shop as well and talk to people, but so when people submit their yield data, they have to submit all kinds of stuff, like did they apply fungicides, what was their seeding rate, and so forth. But here, I'm going to get ahead a little bit. So our yield contest, Cheryl Reese, who was going to give this presentation, she did a really nice job compiling 12 years worth of yield data from our yield contest winners, which is all online. So she found that the dry land, that's 1,294 fields total that were submitted by farmers. And these are not experiments, it's just their yields. Over the 12 years, the average dry land was 65.8 bushels per acre. So there's a bar graph, all that. Really a lot of ups and downs. There's no really trends going on too much. Had some drier years there, but so 65.8 bushels per acre. Remember that number? So the irrigated, which is a much smaller data set, only 209 fields, those were 8.7 bushels per acre higher on average, 75.8 bushels per acre for our irrigated. So that shows there's about roughly an 8.7 bushel per acre advantage to either irrigation or a year where if you're in one of those spots that has really great rainfall, right? So over 8.7 over the average. Seems pretty reasonable. So when she also broke out the top 10 winners for each year in the yield contest. So dryland, remember, that's a huge data set, 1,254 fields. She found that the top 10 yielded about 20.2 bushels per acre higher than the rest of the field, which is pretty good in soybeans. Now, a lot of that is they happen to be in a sweet spot that got the rain, but as we saw on the previous slide, that's maybe 8 to 10 bushels, that extra rain. So where's that other 10 coming from? Likely management is a large component of that. Oh, there you go. So a popular research topic with our on-farm people is foliar fungicides, with our on-farm cooperators, I should say. There we go. So I'm going to start here, just start kind of at the ground level. This is looking at our yield results. This is not research here. It's looking at the yield contest winners. And something that's kind of interesting is that the top 10 yield contest winners usually did not see a response to foliar fungicide. And this is applied at R3, so that'd be early flowering, usually late July, early August for us. But when you look at overall, there's a lot on this slide, but really this is all of the entire dryland people, growers. We saw a 5.7 bushel increase to fungicides, the rest of the field. So the high yielding environment really did not see that. So it's not really scientific, but this is just a place to start. I'm going to skip a few slides here. This is just kind of some plant pathology. So when we look at the yield contest winners, another thing, the top 10 was typically planting, they're pushing that maturity range. A group 2, which I'm guessing probably is pretty much never growing up here, but these are probably more growing in the southern part of South Dakota. Where I'm at in Brookings is in the middle. That would even probably be pushing the limit there. So, but nonetheless, the moral of the story is they're pushing the limit on the maturity rating, which up here, whatever that would be, 1.5 maybe. So they're pushing that. So, but overall, really no difference between group 0, 1s, and 2s when you look at all the entries. So the group 3 was a little bit of a lag there. Maybe some people, the northern locations, were growing that and maybe shouldn't have been. So, but here, so we're actually going to talk some science right now. We were talking about yield contest winners just to kind of give us a general idea of just kind of paint the picture a little bit. But here, John Kleinjohn, who's an extension agronomist down at SDSU, he just did this small plot study. Now, this is going to be done on a research farm. It was, we're talking maybe 1 to 2 acres of land to test all this stuff. So he did 3 planting dates, early or late April. I don't think is that probably going to be done here. Maybe that's a little early. Then he did one in May 23rd and then June 10th. This is a 3-year study. 4 different maturities ranging from 0.7 all the way up to 2.1. He did a fungicide, Veltima, 7 ounces per acre at early flowering, and replicated 3 times. And we talked that replication, right? So just a little background, nothing too important on that slide. Here's the Veltima. It's a group 3 and 11, so there's a couple modes of action. So just some real brief economics on this. It would be about $25 an acre for the chemical, right? So then another $8 to apply it. So we're looking at about $32, $33 per acre for the application plus the chemical cost. And if we have $12.70 per bushel on beans, we're going to need about sorry, 2.5 bushel yield response, 2.6 bushel yield response per acre just to break even on that. So remember 2.6. So when we look at our planting dates here in this study, generally the late April and we almost have a month between these two. There's really not too much difference. For whatever reason, we had that 1.6 jumped up a little higher there, but not a whole lot of difference there. But really, we fell off pretty good after about June, when we got to June 10th, which you'd expect. Nothing too earth-shattering here. But what's really interesting was, I hadn't seen this till recently, but we look at our late April planted soybeans, really no response to foliar fungicide there. But we got to mid-May, which is when a lot of the soybeans get planted. People, they get their corn done first and then switch over to beans. This is where the fungicide responses were noted. So we're looking at about 3 bushel. The yellow is fungicide, the blue is not. So it's our 1.6 here, maturity, 3 bushels there. And here, well, 2.1, that's only a bushel. But this would probably be the norm, this 1.6 planted mid-May. So 3 bushels. We said we needed 2.6 to break even, so you at least broke even there. It's whether it was worth it, maybe not. So we just talked about small plots on a research farm now. So here's the on-farm. These are half-mile long strips. So I've compiled all the fungicide trials done over the years, and I did this last spring for a seminar we had down in Brookings, so I remember I said we broke these out into medium yield zones and high yield zones. This is the medium, 35 to 55 bushels. Overall, we only saw a 0.6 bushel per acre advantage. I mean, granted, there are some instances here. You had 4.7, 4.5, 3.6. Now that I know planting date may be a factor, it might be interesting to go back and look to see what the planting dates were on those. And then I'm going to move up to our high yield zones, 55 bushels per acre. We had 0.6, remember, for our medium. So we had 1.9, a little better for our high yield zones. And we had some fairly decent ones, 6.3. This was in Roberts County, which is right straight south of here, borders North Dakota. That was Preex or Xemium in 2016. But again, we saw some responses there. These top 5 probably would have been economical, but that's only, about a fourth or a fifth of the data set. So again, it would be interesting to go back and look at the planting dates here. I don't have these on the chart, but there might be some potential. And the only way you're going to figure this out is to do the research on your farm. So the take-home message is the date of planting by fungicide. Yeah, earlier planting we saw some higher yields, but we observed that 2 to 3 bushel per acre on fungicides. It says before June 1st, so just say there's more like mid-May, but really we didn't see that with the early planted soybeans. So it might be another incentive to consider planting soybeans early. So so the full season relative maturity maximized yield if planted in late April. So really that's about it for that one. So the next topic here is going to be seeding rates. This is another popular one. It's pretty easy for growers to do, just a few pushes of a button in your planter these days. You don't have to get out and change sprockets and gears and get your hands all greasy like you used to. So the seeding rates, again, we're going to start at the ground level, just kind of getting an idea what's going out there, looking at the yield contest winners. Nothing scientific here, but when we look at our top 10, our elite ones, we had, looks like they're using about 175,000 an acre. So compared to the rest of the field, which is about 155. So maybe there's something there. And again, this is Dr. Klein-John's small plot work. So we're going from the yield contest, which is not scientific, to the university research farm, which is a scientific study, but just on a smaller scale. And here's some nice pictures he took. We've probably seen these before at just 60,000 seeds an acre, a very branched plant. And the branches and the pods become much less as we increase the seeding rate. 180, we have just one stem there with all the pods on it. So, it also not too terribly surprising, our yields increase with our populations. Once we get to about 140, things level off, so that's about what we usually expect. In our seeding rates here by planting date, this one, recall in that study with the fungicides that we showed before in the planting dates, we didn't see a huge difference between May 1st and May 15th. But this one we did, and this is only 1 year. This was 2023, so this is kind of hot off the press, so to speak. So they saw really a nice linear drop there from May 1st to June 2nd there. So, and it appears that maybe the May 1st, the early planted soybeans, there might be an advantage to look at planting a higher seeding rate there. So that's, in the past we've always been told that planting after May 20th, you should increase your seeding rate. So seeding rates can get very confusing and complex in soybeans, as a lot of you know. You see one thing, then you see another. So really doing the work on your own farm with that, it's one of the easier trials to do, is probably the way to go. So, and here's another study. This was multi-state study that was done that showed their conclusion was that the poorer yielding areas of fields, you would be better off increasing your seeding rate by 43% based on all these sites that was done, that study that was released out there. So what do? You would probably, instead of doing your whole farm, reducing your seeding rate by 36%, you might want to just test that on a small 15 or 20 acres to start with, your 3 or 4 strips. So we did have a farmer, Brown County, well, that's where Aberdeen's at, right on the North Dakota border there. So he wanted to look at a higher seeding rate, normally seeded at 160. He wanted to raise his seeding rate to 200,000. So he did his 4 strips, very nice trial he performed. From the looks of it, he got 1.2 bushels. So it did not meet our 2.3 bushels, which was the 95% confidence interval. So, on the surface, it just looks like, well, just wasted money on seed, right? From a simplistic viewpoint, that's what happened. So here's the yield map of that study. You get his, for this one strip here, I don't know what happened there, but his higher yielding area of the field, this is 55 to 70 bushels. And then on this hill, as you would expect, much lower yielding, you're talking 35 to 40. So this is kind of eye-popping here. You can see how these 200,000 seeds per acre strips, what we ended up with was there were yield responses in places to that 200,000 seeding rate, right there, but big losses right there. So variable rate seeding might be a thing to consider looking at. So remember when we looked at when we just averaged those 4 strips, it said there was, we got a laser there? There we go. Just covered it up with my finger. Anyway, so it looked like there was nothing there. But when we break out the results, and this is on the website, when we at 200,000 seeds per acre, our medium yield zone, which was on the hill, look how much yield was lost by increasing that seeding rate. Probably used too much of the very limited water that was there. But in those high yielding zones, we actually had an 8.8 bushel increase. And it averaged out to about nothing, but that just shows the amount of variability in the different results you can see in a field. So really the take-home message from all this stuff, this is Cheryl's. We kind of went over all this, but analysis of management practices used in yield contest winners in other crops have produced similar findings, so indicating that no single one-size-fits-all formula for achieving high yield potential or even reducing inputs. You can do research to raise your yields or to reduce your inputs or both. So it shows the importance of doing your own work. It's, this day and age with modern technology, it doesn't take near as much work as it used to. And yield monitors, we can collect so much useful data. So that concludes my talk. I'll go back to the beginning here, and just my email address is there if anyone wants to get a hold of me ever. So I'll take any questions if anybody has any. There we go.